Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's spotlight shines on the rising stars of the legal world, where young firms, bold ideas, and smarter systems take center stage. Standing tall at the intersection of law and leadership, he's the digital strategist, the legal growth architect, the man with the mic. Make some noise for your host, Will McCrate. And today's guest, proof that modern law isn't about working more, it's about working smarter. Welcome, Chris Earley. The game is changing. Let's get you in it. This is Legal Currents with Will McCrate.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Legal Currents podcast. Today we have a very special guest, my friend Chris Earley. Chris is the founder and CEO of Earley Law Group Injury Lawyers, headquartered out of Boston. Also the author of Scaling the Wall, which he's been generous to send me a copy of, something we'll talk a little bit more about that I really enjoyed. Essentially a memoir where Chris walks you through his 30s and kind of shares his experiences scaling the firm and how his childhood kind of impacted what got him there. Also, something I learned today is a DJ on the side for fun, which maybe we'll talk a little bit about, but also one of the nicest, most kind people that I know. And I mean that. And so, Chris, I'm really grateful that you're joining us and excited to talk here.
I'm so grateful. A lot of respect for you and what you're doing. I shared this with you a couple months ago. I was at a conference, you were at a conference, and someone said to me, yeah, that guy Will, he has really good aura. And I was like, he does. Like, he has a good aura. And so I appreciate you and your good aura because you have good energy. So being here with you today is, gives me energy, lights me up. So I appreciate it.
I appreciate that. I think I told you in response to that. Like, I think that's my favorite compliment that I've ever gotten.
You can't do much better than that. That's pretty good.
Yeah. And I would say the same. I would say the same about you. So I guess, Chris, before we jump into specifics, I want you to kind of tell people, a little bit of your story, because you have a pretty unique story and how you kind of ended up starting your firm.
It's a long story, but it's a unconventional story of sort of early challenges out of the gate. But I also had a lot of opportunities. So I try to take advantage of the opportunities that I was given. And, anyone who knows me, I'm just kind of put my head down. I work hard. Too dumb to quit sometimes. And, as supporting law firms or scaling, it's a hard game that we're playing here. It's super challenging. So I'm okay with turbulence, uncertainty, and risk. And I think that stems from the early years as I was growing up and coming up. But they say that we're generally, as adults, sort of just big kids, right? We sort of imprints on us from a young age, and we sort of carry that stuff. So I was carrying some negative stuff in my 30s that my wife put a mirror up and said, hey, dude, like, you got to get this right or you're going to lose me, or you're going to lose your family. And so I had to figure some stuff out quickly through a lot of ugly work. And that's why I wrote the book, the memoirs, just to hopefully help one person who identifies a struggle, and that there's a lot of hope and opportunity for those who will, do the work.
Yeah. And, I was telling you this before we started recording, but, not only is it a cool story, but it's very well written, like very great book. It's something I've actually enjoyed as I've been reading it. And you have a very interesting story as far as how you started out with your firm. Can you talk about what that journey looked like specific to you?
Yeah, 100%. So I came out of law school in 2004, but 85 years ago, and the job market wasn't strong. I didn't go to a top tier law school. I didn't network in law school. And I came out without like anything at all, to be honest. I had no money, just heavy debt, no connections. And I met an older lawyer, much significantly older, and we had this very loose quasi-partnership. I wasn't making any money, so that was just a few months. Excuse me. And then at that point, we agreed to part like gentlemen. I just hung a shingle in Boston, hyper competitive. This is the days of, yellow pages, right? They were on their way out, but they were still relevant, but just hustling to get cases. And I just started it. And I got to be honest, for like probably 15 years, it wasn't a business. It was like, I was a hack. I was just like grinding, hustling, not having no metrics, no KPIs. I didn't know what that was. And then I started to scale when the pandemic started, when everyone else was pulling back again. I like risk. I'm okay. I invite risk. I think risk is where the good things happen if you take calculated smart risk. So leaned in, grew, started going to conferences, started hiring a bunch, and then we've grown quite a bit. But that book is one of my biggest achievements. Like, that lights me up a lot more than settling a significant case. Like, that to me is like my story, and that's why it hits me very strongly when you talk about my story, because it's so humbling, for you to say those words about my story, because it's like just super grateful for everything that I've been given. So that's my two writer downers to the audience that I can share. Invite risk, be okay with risk, and do the ugly work, whatever that is. If you're scaling a law firm, you're going to have to do ugly work. If you're working on your mental health, that's ugly work. You have to do those hard things in order to break through and have the life that you're entitled to, that you deserve. That's where I'm really keen on, is hopefully helping other lawyers, non-lawyers, in any way, small way I can. I'm no expert, but I'm an expert in my story, and I like to be open and share about it.
It's a story that a lot of people can learn from. Something I think that's very cool, right? Especially over the past couple of years, to your point. I feel like every time I am at a mastermind, a conference, I feel like there's a great chance that I'm going to run into Chris. It is a difficult thing. It's not an easy thing to take that time away from your firm, to go to a mastermind, to go to a conference. I think a lot of that holds people back from attending these things. And so I'm curious to hear some of your thoughts on, could you tell people a little bit about, what a mastermind is, maybe if they've never been to one, and what role that has played in your journey?
Well, happy to. I always love seeing you at those events, because we always have a good time, because you're a consummate learner, and so I am too. That's how we go to these things. So we're always learning. We're forever learning. So a mastermind is a nice collection of people who are geeking out, right? It's a nice small, intimate room of people who are sharing ideas, being vulnerable, right? I feel like the most successful mastermind participants are those who are vulnerable and leave it all out. There's no pride or bragging. It's just like, I got problems. These are my problems, and you come away with some solutions. But that's the easy part. The hard part is like doing the work. So I took this from a mentor of mine. I try to do the work on the plane. Like, okay, here's what I'm going to do, when I'm going to get it done, who I'm going to ask to get those things done, right? Because we can get all these ideas. But, someone quite well, Seth Price, said once, nothing good happens in front of a computer. Like, you can't grow in front of a computer. You can't meet people in front of a computer. You can't get inspired. So like, when you got to get out of your own way. And like, that's for me, what I had trouble doing. I got out of my own way, started going to conferences, hired good people. So they took care of the handling the cases while I'm away. But I think you got to like get on airplanes. You have to get away sometimes to think, to be challenged, to grow. I just talked to a guy this morning from Florida, Chad Robinson. He and I met at that John Fisher Mastermind in New York City this past May. I would have met him. Now we have a connection. And so I just sent him my book today. It's like little things like that. Like, we create these relationships and try to, foster relationships. But yeah, big fan of masterminds, Will. I think they're massive.
Yeah. I think that part of the reason why they fit so well for you in particular is you are someone who is very open to sharing, right, what you've learned. And those, are the things that separate those experiences, the good ones from the great ones. Not everybody has that same mindset as you, right? What does it mean to you to like share things? How has that, played a role in your growth?
It's everything. You have to share. A mutual friend of ours, Craig Goldenfarb, down in Florida, he's always sharing. He's like a serial sharer, and look how successful he is. So you really do. I think your life gets better when you share, because you get more fulfillment and you get more depth to your experience when you're helping people along. And so, yeah, I don't have a lot of expertise, but I share what little I do know, and like, people appreciate that. I think the givers do truly win. Like, there's a lot of selfishness in the law, outside the law, wherever, but like, it took me a long time to figure this out. You're way ahead of when I was in my, when I was your age. Like, I didn't have half things figured out that you have figured out. So I envy you for getting it so early in the game. Seriously, and you're getting on these. You're going to these big rooms, and you belong. most people are double your age in that room, but you belong there. So you're giving knowledge. I've seen you stand up and you're sharing stuff. You've emailed me information, not looking for anything in return. You're a giver. That's why you're winning, right? I think the givers do win, whatever winning looks like. I think that's what's so crucial. I like to educate lawyers with little that I know to share with them, to open up to them. And I try to, that's why really I wrote the book, is to help other people, right? And I think that's where the good stuff is, helping people, serving people.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I also think you're selling yourself short as far as your capabilities are concerned. Something that I feel very strongly about is the idea of increasing your surface area for luck. That's something where I feel like, there's luck involved in everything in life, right? But what we can control is to make our surface area for that luck to land, on us greater. I want to hear your thoughts, on that idea, because I think that a lot of going to masterminds and a lot of going to conferences and putting yourself out there and writing your book and making the connections is, whether intentionally or not, you're increasing your surface area for good things to happen to you. How do you relate to something like that?
A guy I've taken a lot from is John Morgan. I've had lunch with him. He's been on my podcast, and he mentioned once lottery balls. Like we want to have lottery balls. Like, we could go to an event like a mastermind or even like the local bar association meeting, or we don't have to. We could say, yeah, why bother? Well, why bother is that you could create a connection that could change your entire life, your family's life for generations. You never freaking know what you may find. So I really think about that lottery ball thing. So I think that's why you have to be out and about creating action and doing things each day to create more lottery balls for you, But I think all this stuff is pretty simple. You just have to do it for a long period of time. If you're willing to put your head down and do that stuff for a long period of time, I can speak to the fact that you see growth. People start to see, and you start to get you get a little bit of notice, right? People, but you got to keep doing the work, doing the LinkedIn stuff, going to the events, posting on social, serving, helping people. I think that's where the good stuff lies.
Yeah, I agree. And it reminds me of another quote that I like to try and remind myself of, which is, it's simple, but it's not easy, right?
Right.
It's simple what we're talking about, but it is not an easy thing to do day in, day out. You talked about LinkedIn there, which is something that you and I had a conversation about out in New York a couple months ago. For anyone who doesn't connect with Chris on LinkedIn, I highly recommend you do so, because he posts literally every single day. I guess two-part question here, right? One, what gave you the idea to do that? And then the second one, for maybe a more practical standpoint, have you seen any, growth or, value from a firm standpoint in doing so?
Yes. So I started doing it a few years ago, and I think today it's gotten a little more saturated, which I'm happy to see. There's more people. Most of my connections are lawyers, right? Or people related to the legal space, right? And so I started doing it probably 3.5 years ago, and it was kind of an experiment. And I just started posting, and I see with me and with other people, you don't get any traction when you first start posting. You get one like for months. Now, just a reminder to everyone, you can't put likes in the bank. So okay, good, I got a like, but so what? You got to keep showing up, be social. It's a social platform, connect with people, be a social creature. And so I kept doing it, and it just sort of is a flywheel of action that continues. It helps us stay in contact, because I may see you every once in a while at a mastermind, but see your post on LinkedIn. It's oh yeah, Will, that's where he's at this week. That's what we just had on his podcast. It's a connection. So start doing it, and sometimes 2 posts a week, and it's a lot of work. It's ugly. That's the theme of this call. It's ugly work, right? It's not glamorous. I got 2 kids and a wife. I got to fit in that time, but I like to pre-schedule my posts in advance. I like to batch them so they get out the door, if you will. And so I literally haven't missed a day, which is probably kind of a weird thing, but I don't want to stop that rhythm. I can't, to second part of your question, I can't say with precision what it's done, but I can tell you with certainty it works, because you keep popping up. I'll just share stuff. I just shared a video that I did on time management to a bar association a few years ago, because I didn't really know what to write that day. I was all right, I'll just share this, right? Like, you can't go wrong sharing some asset that's going to help people out. And I lean into vulnerability. I will, mention, hey, I was on Will's podcast today. You should, connect with him if you're not already connected with him, right? Check out his podcast. Shout you out, shout other people out. And then people like authenticity. It's kind of all I know is to be myself, right? And so it's kind of easy. But I see more people coming on, and it's popping the numbers I see on LinkedIn. But I think the best day to start is today. If you're going to get going, it's just getting busier and busier. What was a totally blue ocean is getting a little redder, a little more congested. So I think you need to make sure that you're optimizing it fully. Great opportunity, right? For SEO, there's SEO.
The more information you can put out there, the better, right? And especially in an authentic way, in your own voice, build that expertise. I think a common misconception that a lot of people think of is social as a blanket, right? Yeah. Is only for finding people who have cases. But I think people often overlook that the attorneys who might be able to refer you a case are on there as well. And if you can show that expertise, that also is worth something. And in a similar sense, I think part of the reason why people, are afraid to get on a social platform like that is maybe a fear of rejection, which reminds me of a conversation we had on LinkedIn maybe a month or two ago, where we talked about that kind of fear of rejection. And I brought up something that I think we both enjoyed, called the idea of rejection therapy. I don't know if you recall.
Yes.
Essentially, for anyone listening who might not be familiar, right, what rejection therapy is it is a challenge, or just a concept where, the goal is to try and hear the word no, right? And there's an element of desensitizing yourself to hearing the word no, but also what a lot of people take away when implementing this is that they hear the word yes way more than they thought that they would.
Right.
And so I wanted to ask you, what, has the word no, what role has that word played in your career, and how do you try and incorporate that idea into your life, if at all?
I love that. That's so smart. I hope everyone's taking notes on that, because that's such a smart thing that a lot of people, I don't think, are willing to embrace enough, right? To be rejected. Like, I don't care. Like, I ask for things. You need to be a front seat driver as opposed to a backseat passenger. Like, I will ask for things because I have a mandate. Like, I have a family to feed, so I have to go out and get after it. But then it gets easier to ask for things. And then it gets easier for people to say yes if you've built up, your career, right, to a certain point. It's like, okay, like this guy Early, okay, we'll say yes to him on that, right? So I'm a big believer in acting like you belong. Even, if someone's starting out in their career or mid-career, like, just act like you belong, and the world will welcome you to the table with open arms. Just, acting as if you belong and not being scared. But I think you have to be willing to get rejected. Like, I don't care, like I'm okay with that, because like you said, it's just a scientific fact. You're going to get more yeses than nos, but we assume there's a no. So we're probably going to get no's if we're assuming no's. So let's assume positive outcomes here. Like, assuming that those doors are opening. I'm a big believer in mindset. You and I could talk for 24 hours about mindset alone. Like, that's all this is. Our success is dictated by what's between our ears. Like, that's it. That's what we're attracting. I'm really become quite into manifesting things, things like that. So you get what you attract, right? If you're a negative thinker, you're going to attract a lot of negativity. If you're positive, you're going to attract some positive stuff to your life. So big believer in rejection. I love it.
I agree. if you don't ask, the answer is certainly going to be no. You might ask 10 things that you think are a crazy ask, and you might hear the word no 9 times, but you hear yes once, and that's something that you wouldn't have gotten, right? And that applies to all kinds of things. Yes. The videos out there, I would encourage people to like check those out if they're resonating with this topic. They're oftentimes like kind of funny, like, or not necessarily the most serious of things, asking, hey, can I go back behind the counter and make my own burger? Can you, teach me how to do XYZ? But oftentimes it could be something like, hey, can I even go backstage at this concert? And all of a sudden you hear the word yes. And so learning how to do that, I think that's a skill that I try and get better at myself. Because if you don't ask these things, that answer is going to be no, regardless. And that's something that I feel very passionate about. And I know you do as well, that mindset idea. Something I wanted to ask you, in your book, you talk about how, that childhood trauma does not just vanish when you achieve success, right? And I wanted to ask you, is there anything that you still hear that younger self kind of whispering in these high pressure moments, right, as an attorney? And if so, what?
I think I still have anger. That's why I meditate obsessively, because I have to work on this stuff. I talk about that in the book: meditation, journaling. We said it before, like we sort of were imprinted with things early on, and that some things are good, some are not good. So I've had to work on anger because I witnessed a lot of anger, and anger in a law license can kind of be a good thing because it's like an angry lawyer can kind of like be effective sometimes to an extent. Then you could really cross the line and be a total jerk, and that's just not good for career development or good relationships. So I have to do daily work, of staying right, staying mentally sharp, and not getting, I used to be so angry, man, like insane, just so, because I saw so much anger, and anger can really bring you down and your ability. So I didn't want to get my own way. I didn't want to keep getting my own way. So I went to therapy, numerous therapists, until I found one that stuck. Hence the title for the book, Skin on the Wall. So just doing the work, right? Because to me, working should serve our life, not the other way around, right? I can only speak, in the legal profession, a lot of lawyers are, they're servants, their practice. It's like just serving. When I think the practice should serve you and facilitate what you want. So I think getting mentally clear on what we're trying to do here and where we're trying to get to is very helpful. And I think it's bigger and better to help others as well on their journey. It's where some good stuff lies.
Yeah. I think a lot of the people listening to this can probably resonate with the idea of like, hey, maybe they started their own firm to control that aspect of their lives, right? Allow work to work for your life, to your point, which I love that idea. On that idea of therapy, right? I'm curious, you mentioned that was a long process and still is an ongoing process. Is there a moment that sticks out to you where, you felt something clicked in that process, or was it kind of a slow burn
of therapy?
Yeah.
Yeah. I did. And that was sort of where I started like a new life of like letting go of shame and pain and anger and releasing that. Right. And that's what I talk about a lot towards the end of the book, is just like getting lighter. The book was going to be called like Journey to Light or something like that. And even naming the book was a challenge, but something like Journey to Light or Lighter, something like that, a theme like that. Because when we're carrying all this heavy anger, resentment, shame, rage, sometimes that can weighs us down. And what happens? Our kids pick up on that. And then what's going to happen? Their kids are going to pick up on that. It's generational stuff. I did everything I could. And I think my big success was stopping generational trauma. So my kids have a good, healthy home and a happy home full of opportunities outside. So I'm a big fan of, I'm obsessed with getting as clear as you can in your head and dealing with all the negative stuff we have to deal with, because it's hard as hell. And it's a constant journey of working through stuff. But meditation for me has been massive. Do you meditate at all, or no? Do you do anything that kind of like centers you, or?
I find a lot of meditation through exercise,
Nice.
Whether it be like working out. You know what? I think that I probably get the closest to meditation. I picked up running a couple years ago, actually, as a tool where, I found myself in all these cool cities and conferences and masterminds and stuff. And I realized I had no time to explore them a lot of the time. And so I thought, hey, what better way to explore the city than going for runs and stuff like that? And that's something I've really enjoyed. And on occasion, I will go for runs with no music, no nothing. And it reminds me of like when people have that idea of like, clarity, like in the showers or whatever. And I feel a lot of that on my runs. Absolutely.
I love that, because you're quieting the thoughts and you're just sort of like in the zone of this deep state. I believe in that. So yeah, whatever it is, running, meditation, freaking chess, frisbee, whatever it takes, right, to like center you, that's a nice spot to be in. Right? That's nice.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
I'll tell you, something that I've started doing is the first thing I wake up, I'll check my calendar for the day. I'll see like what my conversations are going to be. And then I'll just take that with me, on my run, and I'll just have that in my mind. And sometimes, you find these moments of clarity where it's like, all right, we're going to talk about this, this, this. So,
Yes.
things that
Yes.
I would never have been able to sit down and truly think through.
100%. I'm with you. It's a beautiful thing. You're like, wow, I didn't think of that.
Yeah, truly, truly. Something that I thought was pretty cool about you as well. Obviously, you coach youth sports, right? And have done some time doing that in the past. I feel very strongly that playing sports growing up taught me a lot of the lessons that have been most important in my life outside of school. In working in youth sports, right, you have the ability not just to, shape some of these kids, help provide those lessons, but I would imagine learn some lessons maybe from them as well. Is that true? Yeah. Have you learned anything even from the kids or lessons that you've kind of learned over the past, decade or so coaching some of these youth sports?
Yeah. So I was not a very good athlete. Just curious, what did you play when you're coming up?
I did soccer in college, actually,
cool.
At American University.
Oh, wow.
Was a goalkeeper. Yeah.
Good for you. Yeah, my daughter.
Right. Currently a lot of co-ed basketball, men's league basketball.
That's awesome. Good.
Yeah.
Well, you're staying active. That's crucial. So I'm not a great athlete. I tried. I love sports, but I wasn't a good athlete. But I want to recommend a book that's related to this. It's called The 2-Minute Manager, because someone much older than me suggested I read it before I started coaching youth sports. And it's about how to it applies to anything, sports, work, just like how to connect with people who you're trying to help grow, say on a playing field or in a boardroom, wherever. The 2-Minute Manager, really quick book. I think it's called like an allegory, sort of like a story that proves that helps make a point. So I am a big believer in healthy role modeling, because I didn't see a lot of that. I saw a lot of sort of dysfunction junction as a kid. And so I know how important it is for kids to have a good role model, or, coaches as role model. So I'm all about, my kids are old enough. They've phased me out of coaching. It's probably a good thing I've stepped aside. They need better coaches. I don't really care about the wins and losses. I'm just are you being a good teammate? I've seen parents will almost have fistfights on baseball fields all the time. And I'm are you the kids are watching you right now? And I don't understand. I love to compete in law and work, and I will just, compete so hard, but let kids be kids, and I love coaching. I cherish it. But the biggest reason I did coaching, so my kids could look at dad in a positive light, say, oh, dad's, coaching, and I'm proud of him. I'm happy he did that. So that was my whole intention.
That's awesome. Yeah. I think that losing probably gives more lessons when you're a kid than winning does, to be honest. I think there's something to be said for being, on teams that are really good. I think there's something to be said for being on teams that are really bad as well, and learn how to deal with that.
It's life. Absolutely.
Yeah. I want to shift back to something we've talked about, which is kind of that relationship currency, right? And what I see in the digital world is, that relationship currency. One way to almost translate that into, financial currency or whatever you want to call it is the idea of reviews, right? So you have almost 1,000 reviews across your Google business profiles. That is a very hard thing to obtain. And I'll tell you, as a compliment, right? I speak with firms all the time who will look at a profile like you have, with 900 reviews, all these things, and they'll say, there's no way, right? They're fake reviews, they're whatever. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes they are, but people sell themselves short on what they're capable of. Clearly that has been an emphasis and an effort on your end. How has that been? What's that journey looked like for you?
I'm obsessed with reviews, Will, and you said it well. They're hard as hell. If everyone gave me a review, I'd have 10,000, because we ask, everybody, within our sort of, I call it the extended family, to leave a review, and it's hard as hell, but I'm maniacal about reviews. So just as an example, hopefully this provides, value to the listener. I think whatever number we were at the beginning of January 1st of this year, I want to reach 1,000 by the end of the year. So I know we need 22.4 reviews or whatever to get there. So my point is like, you need, whether it's reviews or whatever you're trying to accomplish, either in a law firm or in life, you need a goal, and like, how are you going to get there? So that's like, okay, I know every week I got to get like 4 reviews, basically 1 a day. We're going to be okay. So I'm a big believer in the compounding effects of things like reviews, because one good review could lead to 5 really good cases. Like, you just never know. But I'm obsessed. I take it really seriously, responding to reviews as quickly as possible. I'm just all about it because I see what it does to move a law firm forward. And, when I see a firm and they're not getting reviews, it's like, well, you're almost like too late. Like, because it's been like this for years, right? I mean, you're such an insider in this, the digital industry. I'm sure you kind of bang your head against the wall. It's like, why are you not getting reviews? I'm telling you how to get cases and you're not doing that. But like, this is again, the ugly kind of simple but hard work. Just make sure your staff knows, like, your job's to ask for reviews. And if you're not doing that, you're not doing your job. You're not helping us grow. So I try to educate and saturate into my team like that. That's why I'm obsessed about reviews, is because they help us. They help us thrive and grow. It creates opportunities at the law firm, creates promotions, raises. We all win. But this is social proof. It's not just review. It's social proof. And if you have overwhelming social proof, it's going to be like, okay, maybe those guys are pretty good. I'll give them a call. Right. But then once they call, what are we doing? Are we like giving a rock star experience, or is a call going to a call tree, like stuff like that? Like, we got to get all these things right, which is super challenging.
Yeah.
But I love talk about reviews. It's crucial, man.
I love 2 things that you said there. First is like, set that goal. That's something that we try and emphasize. It's one thing to say, hey, get more, right? It's another thing to say, here's where we need to be.
Yeah.
And then, that social proof, we see that translate from a conversion standpoint.
Totally.
And so that's also doing 2 things, right? Like, that visibility only matters if you can convert upon it. We've seen those review counts to be crucial in that sense. But also, right, if let's say, we're looking at, trying to help a firm grow into a certain market. If we see that there's firms there who have 800, 900, 1,000 reviews, that also is doing a lot to protect yourself from other people coming into your market.
Right.
If you have 20 reviews, you might be dominating that market. That is not a large barrier for someone else to prevent them from stepping into and surpassing that, especially in the day where we have some of these firms, right, who kind of machine them out. So I think that's really cool. And that's what I tell people is usually the best thing that they can do themselves through just hard work to help, scale things. And it translates to AI search, all these other methods. Yeah.
Well, one thing we just talked about earlier is like saying no. Like, what's the worst someone could say? Like, I'm not going to leave you a review. Nobody is going to say, I'm not going to leave you a review. It almost never happens. Now, they always say yes, but what's your follow-up process? Right? Are you like pesky where you like follow up and say, hey, Will, like, you never left there? Just in a nice way, like, hey, Will, were you able to leave that review? Oh, sorry, Chris. And I'm a big fan of commitment. So when I ask you, like, hey, Will, would you leave me a review? And you commit to that, it's almost like we like to abide by our agreements in life. Like, it makes us feel good to comply with that. And so I'm thinking about a book. I think it's escaped me right now. But anyway, talks about studies were done. So people need a reason to leave a review. I can't just say, hey, Will, would you leave a review, please? Listen, Will, I'm trying to get to 1,000 reviews. These reviews help us reach more members of the community. Would you please leave a review? The why, I've learned, is really important than just, hey, Will, you got 5 minutes to review. Like, that to me, and I taught that to my team once I learned that myself, and that's been massive. But you need to be constantly educating your team, because I can only get so many reviews myself. You can only get so many reviews yourself. You need people helping you to get those. But I think it's low-hanging fruit. You got to get those things. It's so crucial.
What is your follow-up process?
I am trying to. So back in the day, I was the one generating most of them. Now I can't get them all myself. So I'm just so spread thin. So it's my team. So little things like, well, first of all, we're gonna send you a text. Like, while we're on the phone, hey, Will, would you leave me a review? Because we're trying to get 1,000. Oh, sure, Chris. I'm going to text you while we're on the phone. Hey, did you get that link? And we have a URL. It's called justseethereviews.com. So then people,
I love it.
It just drives them right there. So just got to hit the stars. There's no work. There's no friction or barriers here. but and then one little tip I want to throw out there that has been effective to reduce the need to follow because people are leaving their review. I'll send a message like, "Hey, John, it was really good talking with you," because I talk with people all the time. I lawyers and whoever it is that I'm asked for a review. Can I selfishly ask you for a review or something like that? And that tends to like work. I don't know why. Like, hey, can I very selfishly ask you? Because I'm like, I don't know, just that's been effective.
I love it. You kill it with that, right? Like I mentioned, that is a very much to your credit number, right? That is something that a lot of people can only dream of getting there, but it's done through that hard work, the repetitions, like even learning, hey, this gets people more likely to leave a review, right? Like that in and of itself shows that you've been doing it for a really long time.
And the conversion thing you said is super, super spot on. It helps with your, converting. That supports. So this wheel, the marketing is helping intake. Intake is helping set up cases. It creates opportunities for us. To impact the community. So all good things come from reviews, I feel like.
Yeah. One last piece on that. We see that if a firm is ranking number 1 in that local pack, right, they are not going to convert as if they're ranking number 1 if the firms ranking 2 and 3 have a very substantially higher number of reviews, right? So oftentimes people might like to say, oh, look, like, right, you see me up here, I'm number 1. But if firms 2 and 3 have 2-3 times the number of reviews that you have, they're more likely to convert, right? And so that ranking doesn't matter if you aren't converting upon it.
Well, if you're ordering pizza, right, you're in Baltimore or like Miami for the first time, wherever, and you're like, I'm going to get a good pizza. Like, yeah, I'm going to go with the one with 300 reviews as opposed to one with 5 reviews, right? And more times than not, I want to see like a great deal of social proof, right? Because must be a good pizza then. Everyone's raving about it.
That is hilarious. It's hilarious that you say that because that is the exact analogy that I use on calls with people.
It's stole from you. I don't know.
Spot on. You absolutely have it. That's spot on. We're exactly on the same page there. One of my final questions for you here. So at the end of the book, I've skimmed through the parts that I haven't been able to read, and it ends essentially with like a message of kind of peace and fulfillment, right? But I wanted to ask you, what's the 1 or 2 things that you're still working on there? Where you feel like, hey, I haven't achieved that quite yet.
If I'm being brutally honest, I'll just lay it out. Being a better husband, because I'm so focused on like not being the dad that I had. I'm just so focused on my kids. My wife is like, hey, I'm over here too. So it's hard, because we're trying to take care of everyone in our lives. So definitely have to work on that department more. And always trying to become, that's my personal life and professional life, always trying to become a better leader, and being, that's why I meditate. So I'm self-aware. Am I being too hard on people? Like, you deal with, you interface with entrepreneurs all day long, right? A lot of us, it's just like hard charging, go. I have to sort of dial that back and be like, okay, chill, like slow down. Let's not burn people out. So trying to, like I said, really honest, be a better husband and always work on being a better leader because I've got a lot of work in both those departments.
I love that. That's, that is the element of being a better leader, right? That is the definition of something that they don't teach you in law school, right? Like that is absolutely something that, you kind of have to learn as you go. And I'd imagine that resonates with a lot of people here as well.
Quickly, Will, I would just encourage the audience to poll your staff. If you have 1 person or 100, ask them about your leadership skills. Do I listen to you? Do I welcome your ideas? Am I accessible to you? Like stuff like that. Like poll your staff, poll your people, and see what they're telling you, because you're going to learn some stuff that you probably will cringe at, but you work on that. I think those things can kind of get better.
Yeah. In a similar sense, right? I want to kind of crowdsource all of the information that you've pulled together from masterminds, conferences, and just your experiences there. And, speaking with people who are, trying to grow and scale their own firm, what would you say is kind of the common thing that you always tend to see that people run into issues with? And, how would you recommend maybe solving that problem in your experience?
I see a lot of overthinking things. Us lawyers, it's like analysis paralysis. I mean, just let the freaking thing rip, right? Like talking about digital. right? You deal with a client who's like, oh, the font isn't perfect on the website. Well, it's never going to be perfect. Just let's put the font up and see what happens, and we can work on that, right? So little things like that. It's just like letting things rip. That's my best and only talent is like, I'll just swing the bat, Will. I'll just keep swinging the bat and swinging the bat because I don't really care. But one concept I want to just shed or just put light on that I'm sure a lot of people have heard of is the idea of Kaizen, right? Small, continuous daily improvement, right? You've heard of that. It's just getting a little bit better, like 0.1% better each day. What happens over a year? You're 10, 20% better, whatever the math dictates, right? Getting a little bit better, but you can't get better if you're overthinking everything. Swing the bat, shoot the puck, and be willing to fail. And that's, I think, where you can get a lot of success. That's at least my philosophy. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And it's funny. David Vickner said something very similar when I had him on a couple weeks ago, and so that's clearly a theme, right? He basically said the same thing. He was like, oftentimes people think to the point where they don't react, something along those lines, right? They don't actually go into action, and I think that's a power that you have when you're running your own firm. You can make that action, right? And so
yes.
I think that's awesome that you feel that as well. Last question for you here. Obviously we talked about your book, Scaling the Wall, available everywhere for I would imagine.
Amazon. Yep.
Where else can people get in touch with you, send you a case, learn from you, just connect?
Yeah, I love talking about this stuff. Like I could talk all day with you. Like great show, great conversation. I love this stuff. So if anyone wants to talk, offline, call me. I'll give my cell. It's will it be in the show notes or no?
We can put your cell in the show notes if you want. If you want
Oh yeah. Hey, I literally an open book. So
love it.
The horse is out of the barn, man.
We'll drop Chris's cell in the show notes, maybe.
I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear. Reach out. Let's talk. Let's help each other grow. Let's geek out and help one another.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, and hit him up on LinkedIn and his website and all that stuff. He's great. And Chris, I really, really mean this. I as you, right, we speak to tons of people all the time. You genuinely are one of like the kindest, nicest people out there, and like it is going to be a great conversation to have. Like Chris is someone who can absolutely help you, but he's also just a really nice person to talk to, and that in and of itself, I think is all that you need there. So Chris, I really appreciate it.
Appreciate you got that good aura, right? So
you as well. Just a good aura conversation.
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Chris. Really appreciate you joining, and excited for everybody to listen here. I think there's a lot that our listeners are going to be able to take away from this.
Thank you so very much, truly.